Happy New Year. Welcome to 2020. This is my top 10 reads for 2019. Now, this was a tough list to put together. Depending on when I looked at it, the list could change, books would be added and removed. I easily could have added 5 additional slots to this reading list because it was such a great year of reading this year. Strangely, there was no 5-star read for me this year, but a ton of 4.5-star reads. And anyway, this is, in no particular order, my 10 favorite reads of 2019. All right, so let's start out with Normal People by Sally Rooney. It was a polarizing read. People either loved it or hated it, or maybe not so much hated it, but hated the fact that other people loved it so much when they just found it okay, kind of meh. Guy meets girl in high school and they date from there through college and sort of jump in and out of each other's lives. It's essentially YA and hipster clothing with literary pretensions, but I still really, really loved this book. I mean, maybe it's this idea of meeting someone in high school and connecting, but you really don't have the stuff, the maturity to understand what you have there. And then as you grow and as they grow as a person and you change, you still come in and out of each other's lives, but there is something in being seen, having comfort in another person who really does see you. And I really like that idea. For me, it didn't matter whether Marianne and Connell got together in the end or not. It was about them being there for each other as they move through the different stages of life. Anyway, I haven't read Conversation with Friends, and I'm really curious to. It seems that if you read Conversation with Friends by Sally Rooney first, you tended to prefer that over Normal People, and those that read Normal People first like that more than Conversations with Friends. I'd like to let a little bit of time pass before I actually tackle that other book by Sally Rooney, but I am looking forward to checking it out. I think it'll be another great read. Bitter Orange by Claire Fuller. I love this summery gothic read. Our protagonist is an introverted and somewhat awkward Frangelico. Love the name. She is summering in an abandoned country manor with this shiny husband and wife, Peter and Kara, and it's just a lot of fun. Now, it turns out there's this threat that's looming over them. There's shadows in the corners. Kara's clearly not well. The marriage isn't exactly what it seems, and all these little bits are teased out. But I don't want to call it a beach read, but it felt like a summery literary beach read where it was just these callbacks to Bronte or Ishiguro, and it was just a cozy, fun summer read. I really did enjoy this one. Reproduction by Ian Williams. This was the Giller Prize winner for 2019. I love this book. I also love the fact that Ian Williams at the Toronto International Festival of Authors for his reading actually picked a section where one of his tween protagonists or characters in the stories is imagining his own sperm anthropomorphized, talking to his summer lusts, interests, ovum, and having this conversation between a sperm and an ovum there on stage with all these sort of literary hoity-toity folks sitting in the audience, mouths agape. Anyway, hilarious, so much fun. This book is about family, nature versus nurture. You've got this rich, white, German dude, this young woman from an unnamed Caribbean island, this tween hustler living in Brampton, this out-of-step Portuguese divorced dad that really just doesn't understand his kids. I mean, this book was so Canadian. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Williams is a poet, and it shows in the way he structures the novel and the language that he uses. And the other thing, too, is this year, holy crap, the Giller shortlist was so strong. The books coming out of Canada this year were so fantastic, and it kills me that they're not better represented in the larger booktube community or the larger bookish community. I mean, just a solid list, and I see that a lot of booktubers are looking to focus on that in the coming year, and I don't blame them. In this year where everybody was focused on Margaret Atwood's The Testaments, they missed out on a ton of great Canadian reads that they should have been checking out instead. And hopefully next year, 2020, this will be fixed and we can address how great some of this Canadian literature is. East Goes West by Young Hill Kang. A highlight of this year was discovering this book thanks to Alexander Chi, who is writing on his social media about how he's doing the new introduction for a Penguin's classic reissue of this novel. And it was one of those things where I got a chance to talk to him about him, thank him for that at an author event in Toronto. And at the signing, we actually had this great little back and forth. And he asked me what I thought of the book, and at which point I completely blacked out and I went on this, minutes-long diatribe about the fact that this should be taught as part of the Western canon. It is a crime that it is not. This is someone that was a contemporary of Hemingway, Fitzgerald. He worked with Thomas Wolfe. Maxwell Perkins of Scribner fame was his editor. And yet, myself, as a Korean-American Canadian, had never even heard of this author who wrote in the 1930s. The fact that it was 2019 before I even read any of his is frankly a crime. I would have been looking for it. It was not there for me. This should be taught as part of a canon. Young Hil Kong has this clear-eyed view of America in the 1930s as it is experienced by immigrants, and that's what made up a lot of America, of New York and San Francisco and all these large major cities. It was populated by the Chinese, the Koreans, the Portuguese, the Russians. And in the book, it shows how they were sort of helping each other. They've come over to experience the American dream and yet are still faced with all the racism and xenophobia that America was wrestling with and is still wrestling with today. It is not a perfect book by any means, but I think it is an important book. And I was so glad to have found it this year. I thought it was a great read. Add it to the canon. Happiness by Aminata Forna. I really did enjoy this book. It put forward this notion that I've often held this past year, despite the fact that it's been put to the test these past few years, and that's the idea that people are in fact kind, that it is possible to live together in this world copacetically, and that despite the trauma and pain that many of us experience, that there is still resilience and hope for us, working together, coming together, and being better. And still somehow this idea is put forth by bringing this cast of characters into London and talking about urbanized coyotes and foxes and parakeets living in the city. I don't know how she does it, but I think we need more books like this, hopeful books that just, leave you feeling good and hopeful. Can I say hopeful again? Hope. Small Game Hunting at the Local Coward Gun Club by Megan Gale Coles. This also made the Giller shortlist. And I'm debating as to whether this was in fact my favorite read of the year. This would have been an unequivocal 5 stars, but it was such a shaky start for me. I couldn't get my footing. I didn't know what the heck was going on. But then it comes together, resolves into focus, and I couldn't put this thing down. This is dark read. It is the lead up to Valentine's Day at the Hazel, an upscale restaurant in downtown St. John's, Newfoundland. It is a Newfie Me Too novel, and no one in this book is getting out unscathed. There's no easy answers. This thing is a tough hang, mitigated only by the fact that Megan Gale Coles is an absolutely incredible writer. She herself has suffered intimate partner abuse, and this is her declaration of war on misogyny. It is 400 pages of densely packed hard truths. She's exploring the notions of sexism, racism, classism in her home province of Newfoundland, and it is a no-holds-barred look at that. Just gutting. It is so good, so compelling, but so frickin' dark. Individual results may vary as to how you take this book, but I really did enjoy this. Your House Will Pay by Steph Cha. This was inspired by the LA riots, which were instigated by the beating of one Rodney King by 4 LAPD officers who were ultimately acquitted. But it was helped in no small part by 15-year-old Latasha Harlins, who was shot at point-blank range by a Korean convenience store owner, all captured on security footage. She spent no time in jail as well. Now, in this book, Ava Matthews is the stand-in for Latasha Harlins. She is shot off stage, and we see the family 30 years on, seeing how they deal with that tragedy. Her brother, Sean, has just kept his head down. He's working as a mover and just living life day by day. Cousin Ray, however, has taken a different tack. He's just coming out of prison after a 10-year stint for armed robbery with a toy gun and is processing his grief in a different way. Their lives all collide with one of Grace Park. This is what Steph Cha calls a social crime novel. So there's an aspect of a whodunit, but really it is exploring racial tensions and how more things change, the more they stay the same. It's almost disheartening how this narrative keeps playing out year over year. This also sent me down a rabbit hole looking at the riots of 92 that I do remember. There's a National Geographic documentary called LA 92 that's worth checking out, as well as a YouTube documentary called Sa I-gu that focuses on the Korean women store owners whose businesses were often thrown up in flames, and many of them were patrolled by Koreans armed with guns. It's hard to reconcile the fact that this was merely 30 years ago happening in the United States. Anyway, this was a powerful read that I thoroughly enjoyed as well. Severance by Ling Ma. It is the apocalypse, and like everything else in the world, it is manufactured in China. Shen fever has infected the entire population and has locked them into familiar routines until they die. There are people working at a Juicy Couture folding clothes until they die of exhaustion. In this world, I imagine that there are booktubers still talking to their camera with their hair and teeth falling out, raving about the latest book by Lee Bardugo over and over and over and over again. The thing that really struck me about this book is the fact that our protagonist, Candace, falls in with this merry band of survivors that are roving around a mostly abandoned New York, and it's being led by a pudgy, goth IT dude that used to play World of Warcraft and vapes and says things like, maybe you should be a little bit more participatory. Oh, it truly is the end of the world, and you still can't get away from dickheads like him. I do believe that Candace being a Chinese immigrant is what saves her in the end. Prove me wrong. A Place for Us by Fatima Farhin Mirza. The book opens, and it is the wedding of the eldest of 3 children, Haida, getting married and fulfilling the promise of her immigrant parents. She's a doctor, marrying a nice boy, but the event is also a chance where she hopes her estranged brother will return to the family. He's been missing for the last 3 years. And from there, we move back and forth in time to see what led up to that estrangement, and also what it is like to grow up devoutly Muslim in a post-9/11 world in America. This is Fatima Farhin Mirza's first book. She was 26 when she wrote this, which is absolutely stunning, not the least of which is in her handling of the father of the family, Rafiq. It was, in the later chapters, absolutely gutting. Such a clear-eyed view of this character, and I loved that. I can't wait to see what is in Miss Mirza's future as far as books go, because this was such a compelling start. Angie Kim's Miracle Creek. It was a great year for Korean authors this year. This is the story about a high-pressure oxygen chamber that exploded, that killed several children and parents and injured many others. Ends up being this literary courtroom drama, but frankly, it is a story about the lengths parents will go to for their children. I really did enjoy this read, and I'll leave it at that because frankly, now that I'm done the top 10 list, I realize that I've talked pretty well about all of these books prior in my videos, so you can go check the archives and take a look at full-length videos for almost all of the books that I've talked about this year. So that's it for my top 10 list. As it exists right now, I could have easily added so many more books to this list, and it was always changing. I feel bad that it doesn't include Women Talking by Miriam Taves, Days by Moonlight by Andre Alexis, Greenwood by Michael Christie, The Innocence by Michael Crummy. I mean, again, talk about an incredible Giller shortlist. These were all fantastic reads, and it just kills me that they weren't getting more recognition this year. There was Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb that I really did enjoy. A Ladder to the Sky, the BookTube Prize winner for this year by John Boyne, I really did enjoy as well. I mean, so many other books that I could have included on the list, but these are the 10 I decided to talk about. That is it for me this week. I am wishing you all a fantastic 2020. If you have any reading goals, I'd love to know what they are down below. I think really every year my reading goal is to read at least a book a week, 52 books minimum. I've done pretty well in past years. I think I can do it again this year, which really, when you look at some of these other booktubers, doesn't seem like a heck of a lot, but that is a pace that I really can handle. Anyway, I'd love to hear your bookish resolutions if you have any. Otherwise, I hope you have a great week of reading, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.